of the doctoral research that forms the basis of Mike's credibility as an exercise scientist.
Here's my 2 cents. You guys think that Mike is the only one? That he's the only one that has a PhD as horrible as this? I mean, well, there aren't many worse than this, but listen, is it his fault that he passed? Think about it. I'm blaming the teachers. What teacher passed this? There was a professor that read over this paper and said, yup, you deserve it. To the same extent, Mike has a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Does Mike even know how to perform jiu-jitsu? He has a black belt. He should be able to destroy anybody. But can he? Depending on where you get the PhD, depending on where you get the black belt, well, that's going to make you better or worse than other people. You may be thinking, well, does this absolutely destroy his career?
Dr. Mike Israetel has just lost his entire audience, and there's no way out of this one to retain back his reputation. Dr. Mike Israetel a couple of days ago was just laying back attending his late night gooning ritual to gain spiritual abundance with the gods of science-based training, to realize that this whole time he was delusional and there wasn't any gods and he wasn't a science-based fitness specialist in the first place. And at that realization came when a guy named Solomons, who's very knowledgeable in the field of PhD and overall education, exposed Dr. Mike for having a barely passed PhD, which means he's probably a fraud, being that he brags about scoring Dragon Ball Z power level numbers on test, but in reality, that's not even true.
Other JD students at Melbourne Law School use their database access to read case law. I used mine to download Mike Israetel's PhD thesis, which I read in its entirety. For those unfamiliar, Mike Israetel is a prominent figure in the fitness world. He's a competitive bodybuilder, a highly successful YouTuber, and the creator of the popular Exercise Scientist Critique series. Mike frequently highlights his status as a PhD holder across all his platforms, from his Instagram handle to dozens of YouTube videos.
Dr. Mike, Dr. Mike, Dr. Mike, Dr. Mike, Dr. Mike, Dr. Mike here for RP Strength.
His company website and advertised products. But what about the academic rigor of the PhD itself? In this video, we'll examine just that. I'll conduct a critical analysis of the doctoral research that forms the basis of Mike's credibility as an exercise scientist. In Chapter 2 of this video,
Dr. Mike Israetel's PhD thesis is supposed to show that he really knows a lot about fitness and that he did original research. But when you look at it closely, it doesn't mean any of the main standards for a real PhD. His research studied 80 college athletes to see how strength, speed, jumping, and body compositions are connected. The problem is that all of his findings are things we already know. Stronger, leaner, more muscular athletes usually perform better. He didn't discover anything new or create any new methods. A real PhD should teach us something new, but his thesis just repeats what everyone already knows.
In this chapter, I'll argue that, according to standard assessment criteria, Mike's thesis would have failed, or at the very least been sent back for major revisions at any high-ranking university. Mike's thesis falls short of fulfilling one of the most fundamental requirements for doctoral research, a significant contribution of original knowledge. The stated goal of Mike's thesis was to explore interrelationships among fitness variables that he claimed were less clear in the existing literature. However, the core findings, that stronger athletes are more muscular and powerful, that more powerful athletes jump higher and sprint faster, and that leaner athletes perform better in these tasks, are not only unsurprising, but also extensively documented in prior research, even by 2013. You don't have to take it from me. Just listen to Mike himself, who openly concedes this throughout the document. For instance, in Chapter 3, Mike explicitly notes that the finding that stronger athletes produce higher rates of force development has been previously well supported in the literature, and that The finding of higher power generating abilities being associated with stronger athletes is well supported by previous data. On the following page, he acknowledges that stronger athletes, especially relative to their body mass, tend to jump higher and sprint faster, and that his findings merely show trends in this direction. He repeats this theme in Chapter 4, when he affirms that his results concord with much of the other research on the relationships between power, body composition, and athletic performance. By Chapter 5, the pattern is unmistakable. The abstract reiterates that athletes with higher lean body mass and lower body fat are stronger, more powerful, and faster, reinforcing the importance of body composition, a point that has been reinforced in many previous publications.
The way he handled the data is also a mess. He threw out half of the athletes in his study and only looked at the top and bottom performers. He didn't explain why this was a good idea or what he might be missing by ignoring the middle group. Some of the numbers in his tables are impossible, like athletes who are younger than 0, taller than any human ever, or weighing less than a cat. He also copied the same mistakes across multiple tables. Percentages are wrong, rounding is inconsistent, and negative numbers are sometimes left out. Basically, the numbers are just unbelievably not true.
Some of the data Mike presents in the extreme group comparison tables are statistically impossible. On page 77, Mike acknowledges the large standard deviations in tables 4.6 and 4.7. But how large are we talking? Well, let's examine. I'll put on screen tables 4.6 and 4.7, which are on page 71. They compare the top 20 and bottom 20 jumpers. Tables 4.6 and 4.7 report that for the 20 lowest performers, the mean body masses were 73.9 kilos and 75.3 kilos respectively, with standard deviations of 71.8 kilos, virtually equal to the means themselves. This is a statistical absurdity. Standard deviation measures the spread of the data around the mean. A standard deviation this large, relative to the mean, is nonsensical in a biological context. For this to be true, given a normal distribution, it would mean that roughly 1/3 of the lowest performing athletes in table 4.6 had a body mass either greater than 145.7 kilos or less than 2.1 kilos, the weight of a newborn. And since we know that this group consists of 20 Division I college athletes, this is impossible. But it gets even worse. In table 4.6, 1/3 of the lowest performers was either older than age 41.2 or younger than -1.6, so they hadn't even been born. In table 4.7, 1/3 was either older than age 41.1 or younger than -1.3. Mike does this again on page 94 in table 5.4. As with tables 4.6 and 4.7, the standard deviations for the lowest performers are impossible. Here, 1/3 of the lowest performers was either taller than 3.459 meters, taller than any human ever recorded, or shorter than -6.1 centimeters. As to age, either they were older than 40.4 years of age, or younger than -1.4 years, meaning, once again, that they hadn't yet been born.
His literature review, where he's supposed to show he understands previous research, is also sloppy. Pause. He lists studies without analyzing them or pointing out problems.
Where Mike does attempt to identify a research gap, his argument is unsubstantiated and appears to be constructed through the misattribution of claims to his cited sources. On pages 33 and 38, he asserts that there's a paucity of data in his research area, without evidence or elaboration. On page 13, Mike makes two assertions to frame his study. First, that the research on technique and fitness characteristics variables is much less unified than research on psychological variables. And second, that there is very little information on the fitness characteristic differences between athletes of differing capability. For both claims, he cites two sources: Bomper and Half 2010, and a book chapter by his supervisor Mike Stone and Margaret Stone, Stone and Stone 2010. As soon as I saw that Mike used the exact same citations for each of these consecutive claims, alarm bells rang. It seemed unlikely that both statements could be supported by the same two references, and I had to double check. I'm glad I did, because an examination of these sources reveals that they don't support Mike's assertions. Starting with Bomper and Half 2010, Periodization, Theory and Methodology of Training, as the title would suggest, it's a book about the long-term cyclical structure of training. It doesn't contain any statement or analysis comparing the relative unity of research across the psychological, technical, and fitness characteristics of athletes. Citing it here is irrelevant at best and misleading at worst. As to Stone and Stone 2010, this citation refers to a chapter on resistance training modes, primarily focused on the practical differences between free weights and machines. Its scope is narrow, and the only research gap it identifies, on pages 352 through 353, relates to the specific transfer of free weights versus machine training to performance tasks. It makes no broad pronouncements about the state of the literature on fitness characteristics.
He misquotes his sources and even makes up ideas and pretends they come from experts. For example, he simplifies complex models into just 3 factors: fitness, technique, and psychology, while leaving out important things like tactics or strategy, and he says his sources support this when they just do not. Communication in the thesis is terrible, equations are confusing and do not make any sense. He labels basic calculations with fancy words to make them sound more advanced or whatever. Sections are copied word for word across chapters. Grammar, spelling, and formatting mistakes are everywhere. Citations are all wrong, journal names are misspelled, punctuations is just inconsistent, and references lists are just a mess. Tables are just misassembled, and it's just a complete mess. I just think Dr. Mike should have just got a time machine from the Back to the Future movie and just came to now, used ChatGPT and went back to 2013, and just life would have been better.
This is literally how you would structure a document if you were trying to fake it. Edit the content, but keep the official stamps separate so they still look legitimate.
And so he's saying, look, they just did it in public. There's no way that they can come back on this. They did it publicly. You can see it. They've got it documented. They can forge. And that seems like a very plausible explanation. Does that not explain exactly what's happened? And so when Milo Wolf is going to say, oh, careful, it's illegal to say anything, it's not against the law, nor should it ever be, to pose questions about someone else's work, to question the legalities of it, to question the methods, to question everything. And if we're not left to question, if we are not allowed to even look, hey, I got a PhD, you have no right to look into my PhD, how can we trust anything?
The corrected version Milo released is dated March 2013. The version Solomon reviewed, the one with all the errors, is dated August 2013.
And so, in case that doesn't make sense to you, which it shouldn't, Solomon reviewed a draft of August. Mike is saying that was my first draft. The first one I ever drew, I perhaps did it in an hour. I was too busy to pay attention to anything, and I just got it to get it over with. That was in August. And so why is the final draft done in March, 5 months prior? Do you see the time paradox that's going on here? How is it that the final draft was done 5 months after the first draft? I mean, you explain it. Did Mike, for example, go to pass in his final draft and selected the first draft by accident, looked at it and said, well, that's funny. How come it says March? It should be August. And so he says, I guess perhaps my pet dog or my rat or someone logged into my computer and changed the date. And so I'm now going to change it back. And so he types in, he goes from it saying March to August. And so he changes everything. And so the first draft now is at the final draft. Would it not make more sense to be thinking, you know what, it's probably the wrong file. I'm going to submit my life's work to the university in order to pass my thesis, in order to graduate. I'm going to make sure that I didn't pass in my first draft. The odds of this, I mean, it's got to be 1 in a million.
Overall, his PhD fails in almost every important area. He doesn't show originality. It isn't careful with methods. It's just so mispronunciated with sources. It's just full of mistakes. A PhD is supposed to show that someone can do real, honest research and add new knowledge. His thesis does not do that. It does the opposite. It's sloppy, please pause, misleading, and mostly just repeats what's already known. From an education expert point of view, this is not just bad work, it's basically academic fraud. He has a PhD, but his work doesn't deserve it. So this video isn't just to bring Mr. Dr. Mike Israetel. I am just referencing what this viral video is talking about, which is Solomon's exposing Dr. Mike Israetel, and that's really it. As of recently, Dr. Mike Israetel says that there was just a draft, a second draft, whatever, and it's not the final draft. A lot of confusion going on here, but we're gonna see. So stay tuned for new updates. Enough yapping. Peace out.
Bye. Have a great time.